you and for that introduction. And I'm very grateful to be and delighted to be here this morning to have the opportunity to perhaps have a step back and have a look at that cathedral that we're building and take an opportunity to think just at the beginning of this conference at how important that is and what might be some of the factors that are particularly relevant for the people that we serve, our consumers, our citizens, and for businesses. As we think about how together we can create products that are really sustainable. So we have operations in 100 countries and sales in 190. About half our sales are in developing and emerging markets. And our products are used 2 billion times a day. And that for me is a reminder that for all of us working in business, the scale of what we do has positive impacts, but also negative ones. We're best known for our brands, and here are some of them here. And it's those brands that in the end are going to carry the story through to consumers. 3 or 4 years ago, we set out our vision for our company, which was to double the size of our business whilst reducing our environmental footprint and increasing our positive social impact. And we've described the way that we want to achieve that combination of driving business growth together with decoupling our growth from our environmental footprint in the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And I'm here today first because as Unilever has been a member of the Sustainability Council from its foundation, and we're also actively involved in the EU product environmental footprinting work, and specifically working in the AISE group on laundry detergents and in a shadow group on shampoos. So I really want to look today at the opportunities we have for alignment and for collaboration, and think a bit about what some of the positive outcomes can be of working together. So you know very well that we're still, as a world, we're facing huge challenges. 800 million people in the world don't have access to safe drinking water. 2 billion don't have access to a toilet. We see climate change accelerating towards 2 degrees. About 1 billion people living today in water-scarce areas, and that will increase over time. 1 billion people going to bed hungry every night, while 1 billion are obese, and an increasing demand for food as the population rises. So that, as we know, is the bigger challenge that we all face, the big social, environmental, and economic issues that we all face together. And of course, behind that, we're consuming natural resources faster than we can replenish them. And what's the business case for this? So the way we have described it, and which I find quite helpful, is we have an approach to how we grow our business, which we call the virtuous circle of growth. And when it comes to sustainability, I've asked the question, well, how can we accelerate that virtuous circle? And I think there are some very tangible ways in which designing designing products, brands, and reshaping your operations can really drive business. First of all, of course, by reducing costs. Less energy use, less raw material use will reduce costs and create efficiencies. Similarly, with addressing risks, the risk of in the food supply chain of price volatility or lack of availability of raw materials is going to become an increasing issue as populations increase, as GDP increases, and the challenges of a changing climate will affect crops. So the more we can do to reduce costs, increase efficiency, and address risks, the more we can then invest back into innovation that works across the value chain, both right through from raw material sourcing down to how consumers use and dispose of our products. And of course, if you work across the value chain, that means that we need to collaborate, because when you look at the value chain, there are always many actors involved. And so one of the great dynamics, if you like, for fresh business growth is actually finding those new collaborations, which is a mark of 21st century success. And sustainable innovation and collaboration should lead to higher growth and fuel brands and what we all see, I think, is that a higher purpose is very inspiring for employees of companies and creates a new motivation. But what about consumers? I think here today we're all thinking about how we can shape products to be more sustainable. And the way that we buy and use products is a critical part of success. Now, the prevailing paradigm, the traditional kind of insight on consumers, which has been sort of central, I think, to environmental product design, is that consumers are not prepared to make the trade-off. So I want it at the same price, the same quality, the same convenience, and then I might also choose a product which is sustainably sourced or responsibly grown or greener, the greener option. Even though there might be some benefits, but they won't outweigh some of the negatives. I think we're at a tipping point. I'm beginning to see consumer research which is suggesting that this attitude is changing, and so I believe that has been the consumer mindset of the last 20 years or more. But I believe we're seeing signs of change. One of those signs of change is because of some of the shocks that are happening in the system. So whether that's the horse meat scandal here in Europe or the melanin in milk scare in China, consumers are reacting. They want to know more. This is a quote from our own research from a consumer in Germany who said, "I'll never eat ready meal lasagna again because of the horse meat. I would eat horse meat, but not when it's been sneaked in." And I think that tells you something about how important it is for people to know. They want to know more about where my ingredients are from, particularly in food, how they're made, what's in it. The other picture here is from a Hong Kong supermarket, which after the melanin scare started to label the foreign brands with flags in order to give their consumers more sense of security and transparency. We've also done some research in our own company in 11 different countries all around the world, Europe, Asia and America, about 5,000 or so consumers that we researched. And we look particularly at this question around food. And what we're seeing is real signals in terms of the expectations changing. So over 80% of people saying that they believe it's important to treat our farmland in a way which future generations can still farm on. That they believe that that they're more likely to buy products made from sustainably sourced ingredients. And that they see a connection between that sustainable sourcing and higher quality. But 2/3 say they can't identify the sustainability credentials of the food products when they're shopping. So there's a desire that they're articulating. But I think many of you will be asking the question in the room, okay, so we've heard some of this before, but there's a big gap between intention of consumers and what they say they'd like and action. Here's a new report that's come from the Boston Consulting Group. And they have done a fascinating study where they have taken actual behavior. So the barcode scanned sales from US retail outlets in home, personal care and foods. And what they have found is that products that are labelled organic, natural, ecological and fair trade, which were traditionally niche, considered more expensive, lower quality, less convenient, tasted less good, worked less well, they're no longer niche. They're finding they've become mainstream. There's a broad base of consumers who are now buying these products. But typically, they're not coming from the leading brands. What we are seeing is some very strong growth. So growth of 9% over the last 3 years across those three sectors, which is 70% of the total growth of those sectors, and 15% of all sales. I think it's one of those blind spots that certainly I would say I haven't seen in my work looking at consumers and consumer trends, and that is now shifting quite rapidly. BCG have also done work in Europe, which suggests to them that we'll see a similar trend in Europe as well. So a real shift, I think, and I'm optimistic that there's a shift here from the stated intentions over to real actions in the marketplace. But what we do know is that she's still a bit confused. How do I work out what to buy? And that's where we come in. And the question we need to ask is, how do we help her? How do we help her to choose, to use, to throw away more sustainably? And for me, that's, in the end, exactly what the EU Product Environmental Footprint work and the work of the Sustainability Consortium are jointly seeking to achieve. To set a shared objective to drive action to improve the sustainability of consumer products. And to do so in a way which engages many stakeholders in a really collaborative process. A process that results in some practical tools, and those tools will advance the science, will advance the implementation and the action, and advance the communication, whether that's business to business or consumer to consumer, business to consumer. So a really shared goal that I think we can start this summit with. And looking side by side at the programs, there's such enormous similarity between them both focusing on environmental impacts, the Sustainability Consortium also looking at how to incorporate social impacts. The EU PEF work obviously focusing on Europe as a starting point, but recognizing, of course, that we have global supply chains in scope. Both got business to business in mind. Sustainability Consortium more focused now on the business to business and the PEF business to consumer as well. And both with the underpinning of a life cycle approach, whether that's with the LCA methodology or taking that through to hotspots in product categories. And practical outcomes, on-pack labelling, communication, policies, taxes, incentives, toolkits, and a partnership with SAP from the Sustainability Consortium to make it easy for businesses to efficiently provide the information online and access the knowledge which will help to shape product sustainability. So some very shared themes with perhaps some spins on the edges is how I would think of it. The Consumer Goods Forum is also very aligned behind this goal. It shares the common goal of driving sustainability through products. The Consumer Goods Forum is a global association of around 400 retailers and consumer goods suppliers and manufacturers. And Unilever co-chairs the Sustainability Working Group together with Marks & Spencer, the UK retailer. And in the area of creating product solutions and standardized measurement, what the CGF is really looking for is, please make it global, harmonized, let's have some consistent definitions. It needs to be simple and straightforward for companies to use, that we need to find an efficient way of making it work for large companies through to small and medium-sized enterprises. And of course, the end game is to drive action and progress. And so everything needs to be oriented really towards usability in the end. So there's lots of scope, I think, for alignment and harmonization. And the Sustainability Consortium, I see as very much when it contributing, learning from, and collaborating with the EU PEF to create that opportunity for alignment together. Participating in some of the pilots, a commitment to incorporate the published studies using the PEF methodology into the appropriate TSC product category tools. And that practice is something that TSC is already doing. So adopting the scientifically based approaches of groups such as the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, the CDP, and the Consumer Goods Forum's approach on deforestation and their global packaging products project. So just some examples, I suppose, of the ways in which the kind of bringing together and harmonization is very possible in a practical and tangible way. And of course, critical to all of this is ongoing dialogue between the two organizations or two programs. So I want to take a step back now and say, okay, so let's imagine the world where we understand environmental impacts, and they help us to take action. Well, we don't need to imagine that world. It's already here, isn't it? Many of you here in the audience are already taking action. I wanted to give a few examples. They are mainly Unilever examples because they're the ones I know, but I hope that will just be the start of many others. This first one is from AISE, so the voluntary industry action which the European Household Goods Association has created has been really quite astounding, I think. First of all, because it has a track record that has gone over many years. And if you look here at the highlights from their latest round of reporting, you'll see that that there's some very strong progress. For example, energy consumption, CO2 emissions down by 10%. Just in the last year, and changes over since 2006 of almost 30%. When it comes to the Sustainability Charter's advanced sustainability profiles, now almost a third of laundry detergent products in Europe comply with that profile, and an increase just in that last 12 months of almost 20% of consumer products which are carrying the advanced sustainability profile logo. So I think this is a wonderful example of a proper look across the value chain and an approach to how do we take action together, and in our companies then taking the appropriate action on products that will drive change, and being able to track and report that. Few examples here of the different ways in which I think that research and technology and management approaches can drive change. And I think some of these approaches, and this is an example, drives change which is invisible to the consumer. Probably will never talk about it. So this is a new piece of packaging technology. Unilever has partnered with two other companies, Alpla and Mucel, and designed a kind of plastic which injects bubbles into the plastic, reducing the wall thickness, as you can see from that picture there. We've launched it on Dove, and reduces the plastic in that bottle by 15%. It's still 100% recyclable as before, and we estimate that once we've rolled it out across our portfolio that we'll see savings of up to 50 million euros just from that one piece of technology. We won't talk to consumers about it, it's really invisible. And this technology is going to be available for all companies to use from the beginning of next year. So a real opportunity for to create a scalable and multiplier effect. This example is very visible to consumers. So this is our compressed deodorants, which we launched in the UK last year, and launched in France and Germany this year. And essentially, the packaging is about half the size. We use half the propellant inside. And so it's cut CO2 by about 25% versus the original. And despite the fact that there are still large packs for sale on the shelf, they're standard size packs for sale on the shelf, we've seen a very rapid conversion rate by consumers. 40% switched to the compressed deodorant within the women's deodorant sector, which was the first area where we launched. During a quite rapid period, we were surprised actually by the conversion. And I think the heart of it is that we spent a lot of time thinking about how to make it really simple for the consumer so she didn't have to change any of her unconscious habits. And this for me is one of the big advantages of that companies can have by doing what we do best, which is brilliant consumer insight combined with great research and innovation capabilities. How else do we trigger that purchase decision? Because the compressed deodorants is really about triggering that purchase decision. And of course, many of you, if you're a foods or beverage company, will have partnered with Rainforest Alliance or Fair Trade, LEAF, or other certification bodies to work on how to make the ingredients that you source more sustainable. It's a benefit for our supply chains, it's a benefit for the farmers, and it's a win for consumers as well, because what they see is that, okay, so you source this sustainably, so you must have selected more carefully, and the quality will be higher. And I'm seeing this time and time again, that consumers are seeing a genuine benefit for them, as well as for the world in this approach. But just like with the packaging example, the bubble packaging, there are times when we are going to need to take action, which is not necessarily going to grow, our brands, and is not necessarily going to be relevant for consumers to hear about. The approach to eliminating deforestation in palm, soy, paper, and beef is one. Another that we've embarked on recently is looking at tea. Unilever happens to be the number one tea company in the world. If Lipton is the world's largest brand. So tea is really important to us. And what we're seeing is that climate change is affecting the resilience of tea crops. So we've partnered with a company called Nature Source Genetics to look at what are the natural tea varieties that are out there that are best able to cope with a changing climate and can withstand, therefore, drought, disease, pests, uncertain rainfall. Probably this is something that we won't share with consumers, but which will undoubtedly create that resilience and for the future of the tea market. So just a few examples of how, in very tangible ways, an understanding of where the impacts are across the value chain from sourcing through to use and disposal can make a difference. But also, I think how important it is to take this challenge of looking for each of us working in a business to think about how to utilize our R&D and management resources to their best abilities to come up with inventive and innovative solutions. And so finally, I want to just think briefly about some of the challenges and then the opportunities that we have in front of us as we look forward to working together in this summit and beyond. So I think that for all of us that, we know what the big challenges are. We can see the big picture, the cathedral where we want to go. But we do need to get down into the details in order to be successful. And getting down into the details can in itself have its own challenges. How far do we go? How far do we go in terms of specificity of our understanding versus the cost that it might be of getting the data and analysing it and working on it would take. And there's a balance there. And certainly I experience in my own role that's something that we're constantly thinking about is where to make that, how far to go. The second, which we all face, is we need to consider the availability of data and the if you like, the answerability of the questions that doing footprinting requires needs to be something that will work whether you have a large research department or whether you're a very small company. If it doesn't work for small and medium-sized enterprises, then I think we don't have a sufficiently successful solution. And of course, then there's the unknown factor of how ready consumers are to change their purchasing behavior and the way they use products and services. I have expressed an optimistic view that the consumer is shifting, but there's no doubt that to make real habit change, you have to think well beyond information. We need to have a holistic view of how the design of products can really help to catalyze that change. And so finally, the opportunity. Well, clearly we have a huge opportunity. If we're working across that value chain, then collaboration is crucial. And there are many areas which are open to us to work on in partnership and to co-create those solutions for the better common purpose that we have. And I think we can get really practical and tangible today. There are 4 workshops: construction and electronics, chemical sector, packaging and packed water, all of which provide an opportunity just to really start thinking about the way in which we can create that practical alignment that we all believe is possible. Thank you very much.